So part of the reason we exist as a business, our vision is get the data out there and people will be able to make better decisions with it. If you love something, set it free or something like that, we're data nerds and we're about getting information out there. So we've got online tools and local governments are our main clients. So part of what I'm doing here today is sharing with you some of the work that we've been doing. Human capital is a community asset. This is a work in progress. We're just kick-starting this. We're working with a range of councils, metro, regional, Victoria, all over Australia. And this is what can you see the red dot? We want to identify economic development opportunities for local government. So we're focused around the local government space. New business, we want new business to start and we want to encourage growth with our existing business. We've already heard that from all of our speakers so far, which is great. And it's a common theme. We know that these are they're not the only things we can do as economic development people, but a lot of us are measured on these sorts of things, but let's get a bit more specific. So we want to encourage business start. So how can we do that? We want to influence them to come to our LGA. We want them to start up in our area. And we also want to, for our existing businesses, we want to facilitate growth and we measure that by productivity, so doing more with less, or by employing more people. Employment jobs there, that's an input that we can put in. So they're both good signs that our existing industry is doing well and growing. So like all good pieces of research, we start with a literature review. We read what everyone else has done. We let the academics do their work, and we spend a lot of time reading. I'm a social scientist, so I sort of enjoy this bit, but this is only just the thin edge of the wedge. There's a lot of people who have accessed. Two that I'm mainly interested in is Drucker. He coined the phrase knowledge economy, the knowledge worker, back in the 50s. And then we have Michael Porter. I love Michael Porter. If you check out his US cluster mapping site, they've got great ways to spatially map different ways, different industries. But I've included these ones. We've got some Nobel Prize winners just to give some gravitas to show where we've started from. And they all say similar things. We're in a new economy. They've all got their own different phrases for it, but it's a different way of working. Post-agricultural. We're no longer riding the sheep's back. Post-industrial. It's not about just natural resources, and the more we put into the factory, the more products we make at the end and the more we can sell. People are the new means of production. So we've mentioned already some of these intangible assets. That's what we're talking about now, intangible assets. This gentleman here on his laptop can be more productive, add more value to the economy than that infrastructure. And it's this new human capital that's the new driver of growth. What is it? It exists in our minds. That's what makes it intangible. It exists in our minds, and it's the pool of skills and knowledge. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, because you've got the human capital to know. The pools of skills and knowledge. It's in the mind of the worker, but you can grow it, you can invest in it, and you invest in it and people can develop their human capital by experience and by learning. And it's the new source of that productivity. So doing more with less, how do we do that? Well, we think of new ways. We think of new ideas. And there's some happy people who are producing things right now. Evidence of this. You can pull apart the data from a lot of perspectives. Again, in this environment, these charts aren't the best things to interpret yourself, so I'll talk to them a bit. We can see the blues manufacturing, the greens agriculture. We see it declining as a proportion of the workforce, which is the red line. It used to account for 50%. This is over 100 years. What's interesting is that 100 years ago, there was about 1 million people worked in agriculture manufacturing. Today, it's about 1 million people. So in 100 years, we can see that our reliance on those industries has changed. I've got lots of these slides. Services sector, the new economy, going up, goods, not so much. Now we're talking about our knowledge industries. I'm just going to flick through these. Healthcare, education, professional services. This is just in the last 5 years in all of Australia. And look at that, with the scale here, we're talking about 200,000 jobs. Healthcare is smashing it, the technical term. I've included this because we see mining and we see construction. Now, sometimes you need to have particular luck to have some mining assets in your local government area. So I've just focused on the metro area, and this is a jobs forecast, healthcare, professional, education, retail. This isn't anything you don't know, I'm just proving it to you with the data. Now we start to get into a bit more detail and start pulling from those key thinkers and starts looking at it from a different perspective. Professional workers, nearly 350,000 in 5 years. Managers, decline in labourers in Australia. So while we're adding 350,000 professional jobs, we're losing labourers. And then we have this social phenomenon that's, again, we know the value of education. A much higher proportion of people have a bachelor degree. Take it away from Australia, this is America. The blue line is your primary industries, the yellow line is your secondary industries, and the green line is your service sector, your tertiary. So it's not just Australia, this is a global phenomenon. The slideshow hasn't served me well there, but because it's intangible, it is difficult to define and difficult to locate. So, because it's in the mind of people, this is some sort of abstract concept. And hopefully, by the end of today, I'm changing from an abstract concept into a measurable. 4 perspectives of this human capital. The number one way we're starting to recognise it globally is through education. So education is that thing that develops your skills and knowledge. Industry, we know things like smart industries, all those eds and meds, professional services, the service sector, even technology. To come up with new technology, a smart person needs to come up with that. Technology doesn't come up with itself. Well, maybe it will one day. But I highlight industry because I think we get obsessed by industry. We look at those professional services, we look at health, but some of the key leaders and innovators in Australia right now, they're not in biotech, they could be in retail, they could be anywhere, and that's why we've got to look at it from other perspectives like occupation. And this is a key learning, we're just getting started on this process, and this is one of the key learnings we're finding, occupation. So that's where your source of a lot of innovation and learning and collaboration comes from, your professional occupations. You might have heard the creative class, Richard Florida, that's what part of his obsession, but we'll look a bit more of that. Now, so on these things, also age, income, they're part of that experience and things that we can monitor. So we're starting to get from intangible into things that we can see and touch and feel, so to speak. And here they are as measurable. So yes, industry is still important, and cross-tabbing a lot of this information is also important, so we can see industry by age and by gender. As a demographer, I'm free to say that women have certain attributes that men don't, because I can see the data, so if you get the data, it's okay to do that sort of stuff. But it's also important, that we look at these other indicators that I've gone through, occupation, and we've come up with a range that we're just starting to interrogate. And we're happy to share any time. We're happy to share all this with you as we learn more. Hopefully we get the chance to do more of these sessions. So I've picked on Bendigo. I didn't ask permission. I've just gotten onto their site and copied and pasted from their economic data site here, just to pull apart some of these ideas based on the information I've shown you. The regional labour force, so Bendigo does have a higher degree, excuse the pun, of human capital than regional Victoria. We can see, just based on education, which is the number one thing that has become common practice for measuring human capital, Greater Bendigo has it as a higher proportion than regional Victoria. Now I've drilled down qualifications just looking at the healthcare and social assistance sector, and suddenly we start to see a bit more of a nuanced picture where you have an even further advantage, if you like, or asset. I can then compare healthcare with manufacturing. This is just me browsing with the idea at the moment. So this isn't any findings. Don't get to a solution or anything at the end. This is just to show you some workings. So the back of the envelope, so to speak. This is what I found interesting browsing. We know that manufacturing is declining as an employer, but we're not necessarily seeing that in output. Sometimes the output can be stable in the face of decline, which means productivity's up. Productivity's increasing. We've already mentioned that productivity increases, innovation, that comes from your human capital. Well, there may be some issues in Bendigo because in manufacturing we have lower levels of people with a bachelor degree. So there's lower capacity to come up with those new innovations. The field of qualification. Now this is where we drill right down. This is very important. So of all the industries, we can also see, of those with a bachelor degree, what they're qualified in. Break it down, we can see health, which makes sense because you had a high proportion of health workers in Bendigo. But we also see management commerce. It might be lower than Australia, but it's still high relative to everywhere else. Then we can explode that even further. So once we talk about health, the thematic hasn't come up too well there, but nursing, of the people who are qualified in Bendigo, most of them have health bachelor degrees in health. Of those, the largest groups in nursing, but we see these emerging groups in public health and rehabilitation therapies. So suddenly we've got some really powerful data that we can approach other businesses and say, well, we've got some workforce here. We've got the human capital that can support you in your location decision to come to Bendigo. Similarly, you might see that optical science, well, we might go and speak to the university or somewhere, or find out where optical science students live and see why they make their decisions. So you can, just from here we can see how the human capital as a measure can really see the assets available or the gaps. Now I'm just sort of having fun with it. The change, health, was through the roof, but it's actually the management, commerce, society and culture in Bendigo. So you've got a lot of those that are growing here in Bendigo. It's not just health. Great news. Age, demographics does play an important role. I can't comment on how you go about employing people based on age. We think that older workers are an asset. So does the manufacturing industry in Bendigo. Declines in every age group. I'm writing a paper on this. All throughout Australia we're seeing increases in pre-retirees moving into manufacturing. I'd like to hear anyone's thoughts on why that's happening. Occupations in Bendigo, great news. So forget the industry stuff, just those people who are innovators, who not only got the human capital but they're in a position. There's a lot of those happening in Bendigo. Income, it's a measure that can indicate, again, the quality of human capital, if you like. Then we get into some of the spatial stuff, some of the mapping, where we can look at clusters. Here what we're doing is we're showing the breakdown of population, of jobs in an area. You can aggregate these up. We can also show you the value add. But this year, is this my last one? I've got one more after that. But this year is, I think, an untapped reserve of data, which is your journey to work. Once you find out the gaps and the strengths in your human capital, and I did allude to this earlier, you can actually find out where the people live. We have that data. It's all freely available. So if you have a gap in a certain type of human capital that you believe can help boost productivity or attract new business, well, you can find where those people currently live and where they work, and by comparing where they live and work, we can get a bit of insight into the decisions they're making. And then obviously we have our more econometric type, productivity and other very serious measures that are more about the output. So what does all this mean? What can we do with this? Again, this is just the beginning of what we're starting. But firstly, we'd ask you, if you undertake these sorts of things, that do a snapshot, get a profile, see what is your talent pool. You need to know what your talent pool is. It's such an important input into business nowadays that There's a whole new school of thought which is saying that that's the main reason why business will decide to locate somewhere to go towards a talent pool. You need to compare yourself to other areas, and you need to see how that's changing over time. There's 1,000 people with a health degree. Whoop-de-doo. Has that come up from 800, or are people with health degrees leaving? We need to know some of that. So just in conclusion, I recommend you profile your area based on human capital, promote that local talent when you find it, try and create these opportunities for learning and education as well, not just to attract the business, but the human capital, because it's intangible in people's heads, they're in the driver's seat. You need to attract the people as well as the jobs. Which takes me to this last place. I think in my introduction I'm a sort of a placemaker nerd. If you have a great place, great people want to live there, and then employers will come. This sort of chicken and egg conversation has been going on for years. There's a lot of evidence now to show that if you get the human capital, the jobs will come. And it's actually a really good debate to have internally to see that role there. So just to end, Warren Buffett, the best investment you can make is always in yourself. This is really just giving insight from the worker, from those professional people who are out there making decisions about where they're going to live. They're now the means of production, and they're looking to improve themselves through all these means. So just putting yourself in their mind does give you some insight into how you can attract new business and develop in your own area. Finally, that's me. Go to all those things. Hopefully you got something out of that. Thank you.